Hi, everyone. We're ready to start. Very quickly, I want to say thank you so much for coming. And I'm Yana. I'm head of marketing at Zora, which is an NFT marketplace protocol. And today we are doing AMA with Friends with Benefits. We have Alex, FWB Mayor, and we have Lindsay, head of brand. For those of you who don't know, Friends with Benefits, or FWB, is a DAO that brings culture onto the blockchain and introduces the creative class to the technology. Friends with Benefits might be not the biggest DAO, but definitely the buzziest one. And it has nearly 6,000 unique token holders, including musicians like Erykah Badu and Azealia Banks. Last year, it raised $10 million from investors such as the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, and it valued at $100 million. So, Alex, what's with the title? Why the mayor? How come is the mayor at DAO? Where does it come from?
Yeah, hey guys, nice to be here and see a lot of community members and homies I haven't met IRL. It's always my favorite part about these conferences or gatherings. Mayor, kind of started as a joke, honestly. It was, DAOs and trying to build more sort of flat organizational structures. CEO or didn't feel right, and we were started by a founding team of like 7-8 folks, and my role was one that matched whatever a traditional, say, CEO or leader role of a lot of like operations and contributor onboarding and community work and strategy stuff, and started every time I'd say like CEO, it just didn't feel like the ethos of the community or even the sort of like executive decision maker. And so I think I threw out mayor at a conference and people were really into it. And it was this kind of, a lot of the theory behind Friends with Benefits as a social community and as a social DAO is similar to, we draw a lot of references from urban planning and urban theory, and that, building an online community is quite similar actually to cultivating and building a city or a small town, in that, you really work to set up, our goal as the organizers is to set up sort of communal infrastructure to allow for people to populate it with their own content, ideas, experiences, et cetera. And in that, my role as a mayor is not to make decisions, but to sort of represent the people and to help steer and steward infrastructure so that different communities and sub-communities can emerge from within FWB. And it's more like herding cats in terms of just trying to get people excited about certain things, or trying to prioritize certain directions for things, but within a much more sort of supportive, representative lens. And then it kind of stuck, where it's funny to hear like CNBC, like mayor of FWB, and I just laugh, but it's kind of like an inside joke within our community.
So FWB is well known that it was like one of the first DAOs that actually attracted creative class to the blockchain. Why do you think FWB is so attractive for the creative class, actually?
Yeah, I mean, the way that Friends with Benefits started is that our founder, Trevor McFedries, one weekend came up with this idea of, if you can look at cryptocurrency as storing value, like financial value, like in DeFi, you could also think about it potentially as storing kind of social or cultural value. And he hacked together this idea of the FWB token that weekend and sent it out to his friends, posted about it on Twitter, kind of did like an informal like airdrop kind of thing. And Trevor's background, is really across the cultural space and crypto. So the early tokens were sent out to musicians, artists, creators, entrepreneurs of all kinds of different disciplines. And that kind of early DNA of the DAO has persisted over time. So it's a really wild experience to show up to FWB events or the Discord and realize that you're talking to David Rudnick or like some other like really incredible like cultural contributors. And it just, now that it has that kind of like magnetism, and we try to support that as much as possible by supporting members developing their own kind of channels and networks, like Alex said, like kind of expand sub-DAOs within the DAO. And then we also do a lot to support the more cultural side through events and programming, festivals, etc.
Actually, can we talk a little bit more about that? Because a lot of DAOs right now that you see, they exist mainly like Twitter, Discord, some sort of like digital spaces, and rarely any of them do any sort of IRL activations. But FWB from the very beginning was really radically different in that sense. So can we talk a little bit more about how you merge this two and bring the DAO into the real life?
Yeah, I think FWB started, during the peak of COVID, and so IRL events weren't really an option or existed. And I think we started to see about this time last year, actually, people in the community started to plan, hey, let's do some sort of meetup at the park, at Prospect Park. We started to see this sort of organic desire for people to want to connect on a deeper, more sort of hi-fi level. And so we just leaned into that, and we threw a pretty fun party at Bitcoin Miami conference last May, and it was sort of the first. I mean, I'd probably claim to say like the first DAO physical event because COVID, and we came out really, really early.
Not everyone got in, I heard.
What's up?
Not everyone got into this party, I heard.
Yeah. There was actually we were reminiscing because we didn't think about. We threw a party for like 150 people, and like 600 people showed up. And it was, you needed to hold 60 FWB to go to this party, and there wasn't yet technology or tooling to actually verify who was holding ERC20s in real time at a specific event beyond just showing, like I remember at the club they were showing bouncers like their MetaMask, and everyone was like, what is this? And people were like buying and selling after they got into the party, and they were screenshotting it, and it was like an absolute nightmare. And I told the story because like 3 weeks later, like a whole subsection of our community built a token gated ERC20 scanning app that we then rolled out at our next party. And that was like a thing that immediately blew me away. Like, wow, this community can move mountains. Where like overnight, and then we just put it out publicly actually like a couple days ago to power a bunch of NFT NYC events. And so yeah, I think we quickly saw, because of FWB's composition of so many different cultural creators and maintainers, a lot of people from music, art, entertainment, early technologists, that I threw a lot of festivals and events before, working in crypto, and it felt very natural to all of us, and we know how to, bring together amazing talent and artists, and it became kind of the lifeblood of FWB, of throwing these really big events, and using that as a way to, help contextualize where utility behind a social token might be, right? I think a lot of people were like, we were still proving that early case that, if you hold this token and you want to get into this, you want to FOMO into this party, there could be value in sort of that access to get into something, and saw that where, when we throw a big event, the market would move 5% with the aggregate demand of people wanting to get into a party, and we were like, wow, this is interesting. How do you start to actually begin to decentralize some of that event production to create more utility in markets or cities that we might not be specifically present in?
So just kind of to recap for maybe people who are not familiar with FWB in here, that actually amongst members there are some really important thought leaders in the culture who are driving the culture forward. Some of the best musicians, designers, writers, journalists, and I am very curious, how is it about to build a brand for such DAO, and what does it actually mean to build a brand for a DAO? Because it seems like in the Web3, not a lot of DAOs or companies are still thinking about the importance of brand building, and especially when you're working with culture, where people are kind of very sophisticated. They already know, the value of a good brand. What was the journey like for FWB?
Yeah, I mean, part of my role at FWB is really about harmonizing a lot of the different teams that we're working with and helping them tell their stories. So in some ways, it's just like refining and making way for those stories to emerge. So it's in past roles and kind of doing marketing in a more traditional like Web 2 sort of context, it was much more about like planting kind of the brand on top of something and then kind of forcing it to be that way. Whereas like in Web 3, I think it's much more emergent and it's about bringing many voices into the fold and harmonizing that, like creating a sort of narrative through that. So one of the ways that we do that is we have a really incredible editorial platform called Works in Progress. With our editors who are all FWB members.
Those are like top editors and writers from all sorts of news and cultural outlets.
Exactly. So it was something that Alex and the editors spun up, this idea of commissioning different stories across the Web3 space. It's a very experimental platform where we're telling really new and emerging stories. And then we have, our social platforms where we're hosting events and conversations. Chuck Anderson, who's a really popular NFT artist and graphic designer, he hosts a radio program called NFT Pirate Radio in the Discord and soon to be podcast as well. So it's really just like kind of seeing what's happening organically in the DAO and helping to elevate those voices, because it's not any one of those initiatives that represents FWB, it's all of them cohesively. So it's kind of air traffic control a little bit on brand, but it's really just kind of showcasing the incredible expertise that we have like across so many different skill sets.
Can we just like maybe backtrack a little bit, because you touched a little bit on different teams that exist within FWB, but I think FWB definitely has a very unique structure comparing to other DAOs. Can you just very high level describe what kind of teams do you have, how it's structured, like how governance happens?
Yeah, so FWB, what was interesting was it started first as like a sort of a pure internet native community. And there wasn't really a team. There were, like about 6 or 7 founding contributors who met, or a sort of founding group that met like once a week to sort of build and create initial infrastructure. And then once it started to, once the desire and the demand for certain things started to become a lot more, let's say, like pertinent or urgent, I was one of the first folks who was like, hey, I'll contribute on a more, sort of full-time capacity in terms of like, I'll give this a go. And then and from there it started to evolve. We have a mantra inside of FWB, which is sort of like, how do we make sure we're always building by addressing sort of unmet needs of the community and never trying to build sort of out of excess. Every time we feel like we're trying to jump on a trend or when we try to like do something, it always kind of feels a little bit of a deviation from like the core sort of nucleus of what the community wants. And so almost like 80 to 90% of the contributors actually were in FWB before contributing. And then they were just sort of raising their hand repeatedly or voiced specific expertise in a category. Like I love telling this story where like the whole editorial team was born because there was so much activity in the Discord across like 80 different channels during COVID that people were like, I literally just can't keep up with this. And then I think Ariel and myself and a couple other folks were like, let's just do a weekly newsletter, or like a digest, where we give tokens out to community members who have expertise in specific channels. So like we had an NFT channel at the time, and we had a culture and a lifestyle channel, and we had a fashion channel, and we would sort of we created this like almost like headless newsletter team that would report every week and then editorialize it into a newsletter and send that out to our community. And what we found was like every week we send it out, we get like 70-80% open rates, because
it's an insane open rate.
Just crazy.
Because it's the community kind of aggregating, surfacing, writing content for itself, and we have a ton of fun with it. We like to stylize it, and now that's grown into a whole sort of comms, marketing, brand team that started with a seed of a couple contributors being like, I just can't keep up with this shit because there's so much stuff happening.
Kind of continue this line of thought. What do you think sets up contributors and team leads for success? One question. And the second, I'm sure, folks in here, probably everyone is a member of one or a few DAOs. What makes a DAO successful? Because FWB is like such a strong example.
I'm curious, how many people here are in a DAO? Would you say you're in a DAO? Raise your hand. Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. I think successful traits to becoming or I guess good traits for becoming successful in it as a contributor would be, I think you tweeted this the other day. I thought it was awesome. Like, yeah, right? Like, it was super catchy. Everyone check out her Twitter. It was like taking initiation, right? Or I just thought that was so true, because anyone who's running or operating a DAO, you guys know the plight where it's like every day you wake up to Discord DMs from an avatar and a pseudonym being like, this needs to change. I wish this could be done differently. And I just want to be like, yo, like, come change it with us, you know? And I think that was actually a big click for FWB, was in the early days, there'd be so much people kind of backseat driving or like you know, writing long paragraphs about like, this is broken or this needs to change. And I remember one day I was feeling a little bit like dejected / demoralized / overwhelmed. And then I remember I was like, wait, this is a DAO. Like, this shouldn't fall on me individually. And I remember I replied, I was like, do you want to build this here? And then they literally was like, I've been waiting for you to ask that, or like, I've been waiting for people to like signal that. And now I think Mike is our head of product. So it's like one of those things where you so many of the people on the team were first.
Mike, by the way, is the person who builds for Apple, just for a second.
What's up?
Mike is the person who builds for Apple.
Yeah, Mike is amazing. But it was just an example where like Mike, Cameron, so many of these people were just vocally expressing ways that things could be improved, but then took initiative and action. So I'd say for folks here who are looking to, you know, get involved or break into DAOs, I think for the DAO you're specifically contributing to, obviously pay attention and watch what's going on, and then propose ideas, but then take action and see those ideas through. You're definitely not going to get in trouble for like taking initiative. In fact, most of that initiative leads into a work stream that becomes funded, or at least, even if that idea isn't specifically implemented, enough for some contributors to be like, oh, that was a really awesome idea that they took a couple steps further than 99% of everyone else. Next time a project does arise that is needed, let's tap that person.
And what's the recipe for success for a DAO?
Oof. It's a really good question. I think having two parts. I think one, having really, really strong values and reasons for existence. You see so many DAOs that will emerge off of just the PFP collection, and there might not be enough of that sort of values, mission, vision work done. And you just get a huge frenzy of price action and secondary volume and hype. And then after a month or 2 months, everyone's looking around being like, wait, why are we here besides maybe liking this specific visual graphic? And so I would say, like, one is having a really strong North Star, at least from it doesn't need to be like super crystallized, but a reason for why these people are together. At FWB, it's really about bringing in cultural creators and maintainers into this space. And a lot of us, like, I got involved with crypto only 2 years ago. I was doing like art and music stuff previously, and so when you then join, we found like this aha moment of meeting other people who are similarly figuring it out from the same sort of vantage point. And then I'd say beyond meaning, really designing the right incentive mechanics and really thinking about how the economy of your DAO specifically works, right? I think whether it's an NFT-based project or it's a token-based project or both, I think really nailing as early on as possible the sort of token mechanic structure and thus the larger like underlying incentive framework, because it'll, when you start to grow, if it's designed properly from the beginning, it'll like sort of juice and supercharge that, as opposed to exposing sort of like challenges and cracks in the system itself. So like really nailing incentive, really nailing the overall economic design as early as possible is probably is a great indication of success.
By the way, speaking of NFTs, Lindsay, how does FWB fit into the whole NFT ecosystem?
That's a great question. NFTs have been obviously a huge boon for crypto, just bringing in a whole kind of creative class of kind of new entrants into the space who are figuring out how to set up a wallet, how to mint their art, and then slowly getting more and more into crypto and interrogating it a little bit, asking questions, pushing on, you know, why is it questions about the environment or questions about decentralization. And I think artists have always kind of played this role with technology of like needing to ask the difficult questions. And so I've definitely seen a change in the crypto community over the last year with the artists entering into this space. It's like we're maybe not used to being confronted with those kinds of challenges, but artists do come in with that kind of ethical approach, conceptual approach. And so that obviously has bled into a lot of what we think about and support through FWB as well. I was attracted to FWB when I first started, I joined as a member because I saw it as a space that was kind of a neutral meeting space where it was not an NFT platform that was trying to shill any one particular artist or approach or chain, but a space where all of this creators and maintainers and artists of all of the platforms could come together to talk about broadly what is happening in the NFT space. This is absolute chaos. You have artists who are making millions of dollars or minting their first works. You have people who are, getting scammed. There are a lot of different things that are happening. Where's the place that you can go to talk to other people in the creative industry and have these kinds of conversations? And FWB really emerged as that over the last year during the NFT boom. So the NFT channels in FWB are probably some of the most active. I think it makes sense because NFTs are really the nexus of where culture and crypto come together right now. And so it's a really great and dynamic conversation.
There is a lot of alpha in the NFT channels of FWB. That's my favorite for sourcing alpha. Alex, question for you, because I think FWB is one of the very few examples of DAOs that's actually being backed by VC. You just raised last year 10 million from A16Z. What does it actually mean for a DAO to be backed by VC?
It means we've got 2 years of runway in this bear market to build stuff for our community. So I think it was a very interesting experiment to go through it. I think we were approached by A16Z and a couple other firms because a lot of their partners were in FWB, a lot of the younger folks too. And about this time last year, we were just starting casual conversations, and I remember the first thing we said was, okay, this isn't my decision or our decision. This is our community's decision, and I'll take this to the community. And so we did a town hall. We asked everyone, what do we think of this? Very contentious debate. Some people being like, no VC money, do this all on our own, da-da-da-da-da. Other folks were like, seems pretty strategic to do a treasury diversification and have support on legal and advisory and all these different components as we move through uncharted territories. And when it was funny, I was like this kind of messenger where then I went back to, and it was so funny talking to tier 1 VCs, and you're like, I got to talk to my Discord friends first, and then you go back to them, and then it all culminated in sort of this proposal that all the venture folks who wanted to invest actually pitched the FWB community on Discord, and there was 400 community members.
That was the most incredible day.
Yeah, it was so funny.
Chris Dixon, in the Discord, just
Yeah, and everyone and the community members were asking them questions like, "What do you want from us?" And it was really interesting, and it was, to me, it was this, as someone who grew up on a lot of social platforms that I watched get corrupted over time with very little insight or opinion from its users, it felt like this kind of really idyllic moment of the first 1,000 users of Facebook asking Peter to what do you want from us? What's the business model? What's your perspective on growth? And so far the community was able to set a lot of those boundaries, put that in writing, put it to a vote through tokens, have it pass, and so far it's been a good experience. I mean, definitely has its challenges with just having all eyes watching and the pressure that comes from it as a community where we're very much figuring it out in public. But in terms of having really great resources and support, and also having the timeline to figure it out has been really, really, I think, helpful for the community.
The final question before we're going to open the floor for your questions, which might be on the mind of a few people in here. How do you apply? How do you get in? And what kind of background or value you need to bring in to get in?
We have a host committee on our membership team, and they like to say crypto is the least interesting thing about us. It's kind of and so when we're reviewing applications, we're looking for people who are have some interest in crypto, but are also have other things that they're interested in, whether it's like music, art, design, typography, books, or like whatever it might be, that you can bring something to the community that's beyond your wallet. So we're looking for people who want to contribute and are interested in playing in this pretty wild experiment that we're trying, which is like a social DAO.
Does anyone have questions? Just feel free to pop up to the mic right there. And I was told that we actually can run over a little bit, so don't stress over the time.
Such a dramatic.
What's up, guys?
It's a very dramatic, yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, I'm Jason. What's up, guys?
What's up?
I was just curious if you had like an update on FWB Fest, or just could like talk about it a bit, or what's.
Let's go.
Thank you for queuing that question up.
We actually just put the alpha leak out last week on the lineup, which was pretty exciting for some of the music. And then.
Do you want to talk about it right now, about the lineup?
Sure, yeah.
Wait, should we say what Fest is first?
Oh yeah, sorry. So a couple months, or like earlier this year, a bunch of community members wanted to put on our own music festival and kind of bring together about 500, 600 community members from within FWB, and we were all like, that sounds like an amazing idea. And so we found this incredible venue about an hour outside of Los Angeles at like this private arts academy called Ottawa Arts Academy. It's like 200, 300 acres in the woods. And we rented it out, and we've kind of laid some of the initial infrastructure down and got a head start on the lineup. And the idea is to really have this community kind of co-create this festival experience. And so, what's up?
In August.
In August, I think 12th to the 14th. And so we just put out like the first chunk of the lineup, and it's like James Blake and One O Tricks Point Never and a bunch of Pussy Riot, a bunch of really awesome artists from our community, and then building out a whole community programming apart where it'll be like any community member can contribute and participate. Like I think, James from the NFT channels is doing a pasta cooking workshop. It's truly like, it's all over the place, but I think it'll be really fun to just experiment moving this emergent activity from the Discord into an IRL festival 3-day environment, and just to kind of see what people kind of create together. And I think have this, ideally we're doing it annually and kind of slowly growing it over time, and to have this kind of annual experience that the whole community looks forward to come together in real time and both have fun and celebrate, but also like, we want it to feel also very kind of like, how can we make this community a better place? What are the things we can improve here? And also have it be this kind of charrette design oriented experience as well as like a, kind of like the town halls we do every month, where it's just like, what's coming out and what can we improve?
Yeah, please.
Are you coming? Let's go.
Yay.
As of now.
Love what you guys are doing. First of all, thank you. I got a couple questions. One is, how do you guys handle like the work stream part? I mean, who gets to really decide who is full-time and who's part-time? Like what are the parameters of what makes a quote-unquote employee in your organization versus a part-time contributor?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We're literally like refining it and updating it right now, because we just sort of passed the 30 contributor mark, which is when things start to like need much more formal processes. To date, it was sort of, as I mentioned, this very organic, emergent, right? It was essentially who raised their hand, who was qualified from like everyone else was like their qualified perspective, and it was kind of like a run as far as you want with no leash until something breaks, which, as you know, kind of has its challenges. But what it did was it allowed for people to sort of find their groove. And what was amazing was, since everyone started in the community first, we found everyone tended to really put the community before them often, where if a role wasn't really the right fit, they were cool switching or stepping in or stepping out. But to answer the first part of that question, I think it was quite, we use this phrase like kind of like soft consensus, which was, we meet weekly as a team, we discuss and sort of figure out what's working or not working, but it was more, compensation was more attributed to a function of like sort of expertise and like labor and time. So how much you were able to commit to, in terms of working. Like I think 60-70% of our team are part-time, as in they have a full-time job, but they're like, I'm really good at PR management comm stuff, and we're getting a bunch of incoming requests, and so we'll have someone, Yana support and jump in and support there. And then Yana's now like, okay, cool, I'm super busy now on Zora. So she slides back. Like, it's a very fluid kind of structure, which has been working. But I would say the next evolution of FWB's contributing framework is we're working on like sort of a much more transparent compensation and sort of time-based rubric band structure, to not make it feel more corporate, but more just to give more transparency to both community members who want to get involved and see how much they would potentially be compensated, as well as to create, equity across the board of okay, you're in this sort of category of contributor, you're an expert, or you're more maybe say entry level, and how much time you're able to commit, and then equating to how many tokens or USDC you receive.
Now, does the community decide that, or is there like an echelon of people who then decide who gets hired, or like how do those actual decisions get made?
Yeah, so the meta governance around it is we sort of made a decision early on that roles would sort of be voted to be created, but individuals wouldn't. We kind of thought this like having a group of people on the internet decide if you are hired or fired may introduce kind of tricky incentives or may not be able to recruit the best talent. And instead, I would say probably 40–50% of the roles were sort of approved by the community. So for instance, like, we had a whole cities initiative where we the community elected LA, New York, and London local mayors of those cities to organize and create partnerships and events and benefits for those local communities. And that was like a full-on proposal process that took a month, with an election process that took another 3 months. But then there's other roles where we're like, we need Discord maintenance support, or we need security OPSEC support, and like that wasn't as much of sort of an approval or proposal process, more so like, I think, trust in the core team to steward it with monthly transparent budgeting meetings, where if things get out, if community members feel like, oh, that isn't a good allocation of resources, they sort of voice in these monthly calls or on the Discord, and then we sort of take that feedback and make iterations.
I think it's a really healthy approach, like this hierarchical approach. Last question, I know a lot of people want to ask their own questions, but so is this kind of a blended, what's your legal model? Is it a corp structure? Is there a legal model behind this? Yeah,
so it's a DAO that owns a C Corp, and the C Corp is just essentially allows us to pay taxes and to handle payroll and to handle fiat off-ramping and onboarding, to pay for, we throw a lot of events and parties. Unfortunately, a venue isn't going to take FWB tokens yet to put down a deposit, so you need cash or USD. But the corporate governance is essentially like a shell. Like there's not much activity beyond just the basic functions of tax and compliance. But it's owned sort of by the DAO, that we're working right now on putting another legal wrapper around. But for now, it's more so just kind of this amorphous structure.
So A16Z came in for tokens.
Correct. Token.
Badass.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
More questions?
How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. First of all, I just wanted to say congratulations on the $10 million raise that you guys did. That's awesome. I'm wondering, from that $10 million and other funds that you may have raised, do you guys ever allocate those funds to like up and coming like projects or like layer ones that focus on more creative like applications, like maybe like NFTs or other things like that?
Yeah, we just actually introduced a new program called FWB Garage, which is our grants program. So we allocated $50,000 to community members to apply for up to $10,000 each for this season. And we're encouraging people to go wild with it, like really experimental projects.
Do whatever you want, yeah.
Yeah, do whatever you want. It could be like an NFT project. It could be a governance project. It could contribute to the DAO, or it could be something creative. And the reason for that is we had a lot of people coming to us with like really amazing ideas, but it didn't slot necessarily like into, oh, this is like a product or this is marketing or something. But we want it to happen. So we're like, we need to just free up some funds for people to just experiment and try and see what could happen. And so the teams will be able to support those projects. We'll share those projects out. But it's like just a way for us to kind of bring in new people too.
But before Garage, there were also hackathons, fellowship programs. There was like a lot stuff going on where you were redistributing back to the community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is the ultimate like multiple year like kind of hope or vision of it is to really create the right infrastructure to allow for the community to create benefits, right? The benefits and friends with benefits for each other, right? Is this idea of, with this grants program, someone hit me up about a fun idea of like, like a Delta GoGo in flight shared account with everyone in FWB. I was like, that's funny. Like just like what do like, and that's kind of what we're talking about, where it's like, how do you allow for people to create experiences like not everything needs to be like a massive NFT project, but just things to share and distribute with their community. It's kind of this push further beyond the current limits of social media, where like Instagram, Twitter, I don't know, Facebook, the usual suspects like aren't very conducive to like actual community development. They're more like, I don't know, like personal billboards. And I think trying to push the scope of what can groups of people actually accomplish together with the right resources, infrastructure, and incentives could be really, really interesting.
Definitely. So where would one actually apply for those grants? Is there like a specific website or on your Discord or something like that?
Yeah, it's on the Discord and the website, and we have like a whole announcement on the Mirror page. But yeah, if you go to fwb.help, there's info on it.
Sounds good. I'll be submitting my application later today.
Sick.
Yay, thanks. Hey.
So congratulations on the growth, but there are some growing pains, such as if you get bigger, do you think about regulatory framework? Because as the community grow bigger, then there's this public issuance of securities because they're trading in tokens. So what is your take on that? With growth and public issuing tokens, how do you hack yourself? And then secondly, with all this creativity, there must be some intellectual property issues. Do you have plans to house rights and license them? What's your asset then within Friends with Benefits? Thank you.
Yeah, both are great questions. I would say on the first part, yeah, I think with obviously visibility and us being one of the more public DAOs, a big reason why we partnered with and decided to do some institutional, treasury diversification was for support in that category. And so we're really proud to have an amazing team of some of the best legal securities advisors. Miles Jennings, who wrote a lot of the securities law, so having those folks a phone call away to support and community members has been really great to advise on how you frame certain things and how you position certain things. But yeah, I think ultimately everyone in crypto is sort of figuring out and navigating those super fine lines. But for us, it's just making sure all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted and across all of our messaging. As it relates to IP, I think that's a super fascinating topic, and I nerd out about that a bunch. We haven't put out explicit licensing or IP management agreements in yet, but we more so create the framework that anything the community member creates in FWB is theirs. It's not owned by FWB, but the idea is that the DAO is collectively owned by tokens representing sort of governance and ownership. But yeah, so far haven't yet, I would say, formalized IP relationships, because we tend to take more of a laissez-faire approach to whatever community members want to build. They should be able to own and retain that creative IP. I think we're currently figuring out some of the more nuanced things, like contributors who are building FWB-specific products and how ownership works there. But we've already been having a series of those conversations, and we lean much more favorably towards the contributor and the employee than a traditional corporation. So we're not too stressed out about it.
It's a really interesting question about IP for DAO, because even talking about another side where there is DAO's branding and DAO's IP. Remember all of those cases when the logo was mocked, all those things. It's really interesting how a DAO can actually react to that, and if there is any sort of ownership, or it's like CCO basically, and people can do whatever. But it's a good thing that people are actually mocking FWB and trying to repeat the same, kind of get a little bit of the success. We're going to probably take one more question, and we're going to wrap up if someone had. Awesome.
Hey, good to meet you guys, IRL. So question about the more creative side. I think for Social DAO that's growing, you're 6,000 members plus now. You guys have a very difficult job in steering the creative direction of your creative output. How do you reconcile that tension between the promise of openness, of growing as a DAO, but also kind of steering and stewarding the creative direction of something that's constantly growing with newer and newer members with different aesthetic inclinations, etc.?
My first entry as a contributor at FWB was in the kind of interim curation pod team, something rather. And it was made up of people who are coming from very different perspectives in the NFT space. Some people were like really into like PFP. Some were coming from like traditional art world. Some were like digital artists. Some were curators. And so it was like a lot of different perspectives. So we had to come up with our own criteria, like all of us coming to the table of what do we want to express is an FWB aesthetic? Or if we're going to, take a budget to commission some NFT projects, what kinds of projects are we going to support? And the way that we decided this, which could evolve and change for sure, is that we wanted all of our voices to be represented because we felt like all of us represented different aspects of the community. So you'll see like for Pirate Radio, or if we do like NFT releases through our gallery, you'll see a PFP project next to a traditional artist, next to a digital artist, and they're all on the same level. There's no like, oh, there's one institutional voice and one non-institutional voice, because there is no kind of hierarchy. And that was a decision that we just made like as a kind of curatorial team on behalf of the DAO, and that pod sort of dissolved as we felt like we had expressed what we wanted to say, and now there's space for other curators in the DAO to emerge, and maybe they will have a more like specific opinion that they want to express as FWB, but that kind of fluidity is part of what makes it so interesting.
Thank you so much, folks. Alex Zhang, Lindsay Howard, Friends with Benefits.
Thanks, Yana.
Thank you.